So it gives us great pleasure to host this panel discussion as Motor India. My name N. Balasubramanian, Executive Editor at Motor India, your host for today's session. So we welcome you to this session. We've put together a panel of industry leading experts from across the commercial vehicle value chain who will share their insights on key focus areas to address the short and mid-term challenges in the Indian truck industry. We all know that the Indian CV industry is going through one of the worst crises that has been further aggravated by the COVID pandemic. Today's discussion would not be restricted to the COVID situation. It would also try and address issues that have impeded the growth of our trucking sector for long. So I'd like to start off by giving a quick introduction of our esteemed panelists for today's discussion. Firstly, we have Mr. Anuj Kathuria, a very well-known face in the industry. He is the Chief Operating Officer at Ashok Leyland and is responsible for the medium and heavy commercial vehicle business. Mr. Kathuria has had an illustrious career spanning over 28 years. And at Ashok Leyland, he has held various positions, including Head of Strategic Sourcing, Head of Operations, and Head of Trucks Business and Aftermarket. Mr. Kathuria will be the exclusive commercial vehicle OEM representative in today's panel. Thank you very much for joining us, Mr. Kathuria.
Thank you, Bala. A pleasure as usual.
Pleasure, sir.
So, Mr. Anuj, thank you for joining us today. And you have literally seen the commercial vehicle industry tide through many challenges and grow over the years. If you may agree, change and uncertainty have always been a part of the business landscape. However, what I observe is the time frame available to adapt and survive or thrive is shortening, especially in the last 4 to 5 years. Times like these have exposed many susceptibilities across the value chain, demanding almost a 360-degree checkup. What, according to you, are the opportunities or changes needed in this industry as of today? If you may share your thoughts, Mr.
Anuj. Thank you, Jinesh, and thank you, Bala. It's a very pertinent time to have this kind of a webinar because, we are going through a very challenging time. It's not only challenging, but it is unprecedented. None of us, even as recent as maybe 8 to 10 weeks back, expected that the industry would land up in this kind of a challenging situation. But, I do not want to take up time on talking about the pandemic. Each one of us every day have an overdose of information on this. So we all know what are the challenges. But it would be more pertinent in this webinar to share about what do we do in these challenging times. If we go back and we have seen, at least I have seen 3 decades in this industry. So this industry has faced a lot of challenges in the past. More recently, if I go back 4 to 5 years, it started with the demon challenge. We had GST coming along, and a big one that hit the medium and heavy commercial vehicles was the axle load norms. And the last year that we just finished, maybe 10 weeks back, that year, what we were expecting is that would be a year of pre-buy, at least when we were kind of changing from BS4 to BS6 norms. So internationally, if you go and see that whenever a country goes from one emission norms to the other, the year before that is a bumper year in terms of lots of pre-buy happens. And that is what was the expectation. But unfortunately, none of that happened. We had our own challenges. So while the industry was bracing itself and preparing to meet the challenges of the BS6, because auto industry in India was trying to catch up with the rest of the world, we are actually leapfrogging from BS4 to BS6. We are trying to do it in 3 flat years. We have not even been able to recover the investments that were made in BS4 while we started investing on BS6. But since the Indian government had given this challenge to the auto industry accepted this challenge. And today we are proud to say that we have lived up to that challenge and we are ready to have our BS6 products. In fact, all the OEMs in the country have already fielded their BS6 offering. But having said that, the challenge that we are actually faced with is again unprecedented. We have on one side gone with almost 8 weeks of zero sales. This has never happened in the recent past. We are looking at a very weak demand going forward. More than weak, as you said it is the VUCA times. It's very volatile, very uncertain, making it extremely complex. And all of this is leading to a lot of ambiguity. But there are very limited options that we cannot say that we will not, as an industry, we will not face this. These challenges are there, it's a given. Now we have to put our minds together as an industry, as organizations, and as partners to see how we can work together and work in this difficult times. What we have done, and as OEMs, we think that we should take the lead. And what we are trying to do is to also being discussed in various forums, including CII, SIAM. We are trying to see as to how we can at least get some fillip to the demand. We have been requesting for the early introduction of the scrappage policy. We had also talked about reduction in GST. Again, this information around the scrappage policy, the request for reducing the GST rates from the very high 28% to at least bring it down to 18%, if not on a permanent basis, at least on a interim basis. So these are some of the things that we feel would actually help revive the demand. As we all know that for the commercial vehicles and especially for the medium and heavy commercial vehicles, the change of axle load, which was done in 2018, somewhere in the middle of 2018, it has led to a huge capacity which has not yet got absorbed in the industry. We also know that for the commercial vehicle, the billion ton kilometers of freight availability is a very important criteria. This, if we go back and correlate over the last 3 decades, you would find that the billion ton kilometers of freight availability is very, very closely correlated with the GDP growth. So the recent uh, news articles, the analyst views, views from various consultants, rating agencies about the GDP being very, very feeble, and there is a forecast that maybe in the last 3 decades we have not seen negative growth. We may be looking at a year where we may see negative growth. So if the GDP is actually going to degrow, it is a bigger challenge for us. So the demand is definitely not going to be coming back very fast. Having understood that, we will have to work on various cost measures, which I'm sure each of us in our own ways are starting. But in my view, while costs can help to a certain extent, but it is not going to, uh, it's not going to replace or it's not going to be enough if the demand doesn't come back. So we as an industry have to start seriously thinking on what are the demand levers that we should activate? What are the various measures that we should take while we are representing with the government? But that's one side. We are also talking about there is a huge requirement on various infra projects. We know that over the last 5 years, infra projects, especially during, I would say 2017, 2018, and maybe the earlier part of 2019, quite a few infra projects, especially focused around road construction, were picking up. That also slowed down, unfortunately. So there is a lever that needs to be triggered. So if we were to get good infra projects, and the government had started talking about it, the national infrastructure pipeline that was announced of 100 lakh crores was very exciting. And we were thinking that this would help bring back the demand, especially in the tipper segment, and the construction and mining things would open up. That we will definitely look forward to. So, in my view, we need to have demand getting restored very, very quickly. And at the same time, during the interim period, while it takes time to get the demand going, we need to brace ourselves. We need to help each other to have more efficiencies. We need to identify all the mudas that are there in the system. And it's not about an OEM versus a supplier or OEM versus a channel. It's the ecosystem that has to work in a very coordinated manner so that we eliminate wastages, we eliminate inventories, we work on a very lean pipeline. It doesn't help to transfer wastage or inefficiencies from one pocket to the other. So we have to take a much larger view of the subject. And I would encourage all of us in the industry to be single-minded in our approach, to work as one big team, to navigate through these difficult and challenging times, and try to see how how much of damage control can be done, and at the same time work together to work on the demand side. Because I would like to also add over here that this industry is a great industry. The commercial vehicle industry is rather the backbone of the economy of the country, and this has been there for ages, and I'm sure that this industry will continue to do well. This is an unfortunate period where we are challenged in more than one ways, but I'm sure that in the next few quarters and maybe in the near period, we would be able to come out of this very challenging time. But in the interim, we have to survive. We have to keep our heads held high, and we will do it. So I am personally very confident that as an industry, we will be able to do it. But yes, the short term is not looking very bright. We cannot expect that the demand would come back in a V shape. There are many analysts which are talking about various forms of recovery. Some are talking about a V shape, which will be much faster. The longer drawn, which is a U shape, may take some more time. Even people are talking about W shaped recovery, wherein we may see demand coming back only to be again going back. Suppose if there is a uh, after the opening up of the regions or the zones, we may see further lockdowns happening in the period going forward. So definitely we do not know and we cannot take any bets even in the middle term or the long term. So efficiencies, effectiveness, these two levers would be very important, and we need to single-mindedly work on how do we engage in the ecosystem, including the government, to stimulate demand. So that's the opening remarks from my side.
Thank you, Mr. Anuj, for the opening remarks. And if I understand rightly, the short-term demand drivers are limited to scrappage policy and GST, if I understood rightly from you. Others are mid to long term. Do you really feel that given the voluntary nature of scrappage policy, funds availability from the government to incentive or subsidize, will it trigger any scrappage policy? Would you highlight that a little bit?
Sorry, you got cut off in the last
Yeah.
30,
Your
15
voice was
seconds.
slightly broken. Can you probably be a little bit slower, Jinnah? That might help.
Okay. So if I understand rightly, you're saying scrappage policy in the short term is the only quick demand lever. In my time, the scrappage will trigger demand that it's voluntary availability with the government maybe focused on.
Not able to hear your
Really
question
have
very
the
clearly, but
infrastructure in place.
still, what I have understood is that you're saying that scrappage policy may not stimulate demand if it is on a voluntary basis. Is that right?
That's right.
Okay, actually, see, the government has been toying with the idea of whether the scrappage policy should be mandatory or voluntary. But making it mandatory in today's circumstances, in my view, will definitely not trigger demand because the fleets are not being utilized to their original levels. What we do is we have smart telematics on each of our vehicles. So through that, we monitor the utilization of the fleets, at least of the larger fleet operators. And what we see is that even after the lockdown has started lifting and some mobilization has happened, fleet utilization has recovered only to 50% of the levels that we used to see sometime in January, February, which were never anyways very great. So Making a scrappage policy on a mandatory basis definitely is not going to trigger demand. What we are trying to do is that if the scrapping of aged vehicles is incentivized, and especially OEMs, and we have made a very special effort at Ashok Leyland to make our BS6 products where the total cost of ownership is actually superior for the customer as compared to a BS3 or a BS4. So if there is an added incentive from the government side, and along with the government, the industry can rally very closely to ensure that the customer is having enough motivation to go for the scrappage policy. If there are certain incentives, the incentives can be in terms of lower GST or maybe certain other expenses that a customer incurs at the time of buying a new vehicle, whether it is in terms of registration taxes, insurance, various other road taxes. So whatever gets incentivized, in my view, will definitely help because BS6 products, at least from what we have put together, are more suitable and will be giving a better total cost of ownership to the customers. But what we need to do is that when we look at commercial vehicles, we should stop looking at medium and heavy commercial vehicles as one big segment. In fact, there are five sub-segments, and each of them have started playing out very differently. Earlier, okay, all these sub-segments were having a similar kind of a demand cycle, and now what is happening is that the combination on one side of the customer profile is also quite heterogeneous. There are large fleet operators, some of the ones who buy uh, bulk in bulk, maybe 100, 200 vehicles every year. But there are a lot of FTUs, FTBs, first time users, retail customers who are not on the forward charge and they do not have the ability to claim the input credits. So for them, a 28% impact of the GST, that is one. The other thing what we also need to take cognizance of is that many of the fleet operators also who have bought vehicles, and definitely there is a pull because they have certain input credits that have to be set off. But just look at the number of NPAs when we speak to financials, the percentage of NPAs, especially for vehicles which have been sold to retail customers, first time users, first time buyers, it has gone up exponentially. So, what it means is that while people want to enter this business of transport, because of the volatility in the demand, they sometimes are not even able to kind of pay their EMIs. Their basic the payback is not there, and therefore they end up having NPS. So we need to look at the situation in a very holistic manner. One more aspect which I would like to bring to the discussion is that from where was the demand coming? The demand was coming not from the long haul after the axle load norms happened. The demand was there for the road construction, from the mining segment, and from the lighter commercial vehicles, the intermediate commercial vehicles, and also the haulage vehicles which were used for e-commerce, two-wheeler, white goods. So there were very specific niche applications where the demand was there. If I take 2019-20, the year that we just closed, the demand for OE sales, actually in the truck segment, I'm talking about the total industry volume and not about any particular organization in specific, fell by 48%. But if I were to just do a deep dive to understand that did every sub-segment fall by 48%, the answer is no. The multi-axle rigids fell by 60% in the demand. But the intermediate commercial vehicles, which are used for the in the hub and spoke model, which is maturing, the last mile, that fell by only 25%. So it is a very and the light commercial vehicles, the demand fell by 11%. So that's a very clear indicator that how the long haul segment, while it has become better because they are carrying more load, it is good for the end customer. But I'm not very sure that it is good for the transporters. or the fleet operators, because they are not being given the extra, their earnings have not improved. Whereas the cost of operating a vehicle with extra load on it, the cost of maintenance, the cost of consumables, the brake lining, the clutch disc, everything has to be replaced much earlier. So the cost of maintenance goes up. The cost per kilometer per ton, the freight rates have actually not improved. So, in my view, for the fleet operators, the axle load norms have not done much good, other than making road transportation, and that I agree, that road transportation as a mode of transportation has become more competitive if I were to take the larger competition with respect to railways or waterways. So that's the message I thought I should also share with the esteemed panel over here, and also all the people who are there on the webinar today. While we have to look at every element of the cost and try to see what can be done about it, but I would like to bring a slightly different perspective. Siddharth, we had done a study some time back to understand that if a customer buys a vehicle from us, and if he were to operate that vehicle for say 6 years, so during the 6 years, which is the typical first user life cycle of the product, he spends close to 3 crores. 3 crores of rupees are spent by him over a period of 6 years, out of which maybe the acquisition cost is only 30 lakhs. So what it means is that he is spending 10%. What we are looking at, what we means the OEM today, along with its dealership and channel, is only looking at the 10%. The remaining 90% is where there's a lot of unorganized sector play. So what we started, and we have done this over the last 2 years, is try to look at the entire wallet of the customer. Not to, when I say to look at the wallet of the customer, the idea is not to get something out of it, but to see what I can put back into his wallet and make his total cost of ownership more profitable. 40% of the 3 crore.
Anuj, you're not.
Private costs. I can go on and give you the entire breakup. But in the paucity of time, what I would like to say is that how do we associate with the customer throughout the product life cycle? Not only just sell him a product and be done with it and wait for him to come back. In fact, Bala and towards whether the dealerships would be relying more on service revenue and parts revenue rather than sales revenue. Actually, I would like to say that it's beyond service revenue. So, what we need to do, and I find an opportunity for all three. And Jayant was hinting towards that we have been discussing about the symbiotic relationship between the dealers, the OEMs, and the suppliers. But actually, if we were to really work together, uh, led by the OEMs and the dealerships, and participating equal participation from the supplier community, we can actually put together and address the entire 100% of the wallet of the customer throughout the product life cycle. On your point about whether it would be online versus offline or the traditional way, as far as my understanding goes, for at least the medium and heavy commercial vehicle, as it is, the walk-in customers are very few. Most of the deals are done in their offices. And so, what we would like to say is rather than talking about online versus the normal ways of selling, I would say that going forward, it would be more like a click and mortar, not a brick and mortar, not a click and flicks, but it will be more like click and mortar. So there will be a lot of digital that has to be leveraged. And we have started at Ashok Leyland, we have already started that in a very meaningful manner by having a very robust and an intelligent and a smart sales configurator. So all our dealerships and the OE salespeople are engaging with the customer to capture the requirements very in a very robust manner, so that we can funnel them and we can eliminate lot of wastages. Customer should be given the vehicle that he wants rather than trying to sell the vehicle that we are able to produce. So a lot more customization through modularity, which we have worked upon, a lot more intelligent interactions with the customers to understand their business. If I do not understand the business of the customer, then I will never be able to give him the right solution. So the game has to completely shift from a transactional mode into a partnership mode with the customers, wherein the association with the customer is throughout the life cycle of the product, where all of us have a role to play. And I think so. Today, all of this is being done through an unorganized sector. So there are a lot of inefficiencies in the system. So we need to latch on to this opportunity. And one thing which I would like to say at the end is that COVID has taught us that what we used to say as, like we are having this webinar, we are all sitting in our own places, but we are all connected so beautifully. In fact, throughout the day, we have our team meetings on MS Teams or Zoom platforms. This was something which was thought to be not possible even 8 weeks back. So the world has changed and adapted very quickly. So I think as a human race, the adaptability that we have is immense. We have to only challenge ourselves. So if we keep on challenging ourselves, we will be able to reach the new horizons much earlier than we have thought that it's possible.
With whatever time we've left, we've received a number of questions. Our team has actually put them in place so that they've grouped it according to the speakers. If we can start with one question to Mr. Anuj Kathuria. Not really a market prediction, but when do you see the tractor trailer and the tipper segment, coming back, demand reviving in this segment, Mr. Anuj Kathuria?
Mentioned earlier, first let me talk about the tippers. We are quite hopeful that if the tipper demand, if the infra projects were to be kicked off, definitely monsoons are never good for the tipper segment. So definitely the quarter two will not be something which we should look forward to. But thereon, depending on the mobilization of the various infra projects, which I feel that should happen sooner than later, if that were to happen, tipper demand would be coming back. But as we speak, the initial demand on BS6 is mainly coming from the tipper segments and the small commercial vehicles. So that is good news. Tractor trailers, again, we'll have to wait and watch. That will take some more time in my view because there is a unabsorbed capacity that is available in the system, which got created because of the axle load norms being changed. So a 49-ton tractor now can take 55, a 40 can take 46. But to make the new, offerings more attractive to our customers, we have come up with some very innovative solutions, which we will be sharing with our customers. So we are trying to infuse demand, but in tractor trailers, it will take some more time as compared to tippers. That's my answer.
All right. And also a follow-up on how do you see the outlook for fully built vehicles during this period?
Good question. Actually, the demand for fully built vehicles will keep on growing. The reasons for that are very simple to understand and comprehend. One is that with BS6 technology coming in, the customer would not like to take the chassis to the bodybuilder because there are certain other risks associated with integrating the superstructure on the vehicle. The other thing is on fully built, now most of this was being done in the unorganized sector. With GST, the tax net being widened, everybody is coming under the tax regime so that we all have an equal playing field. So even the OEMs, when they do the superstructure and convert to fully built, there would be no disadvantage as such on the cost side. And definitely the quality that a OEM can deliver on the fully built is much superior. So the customers would definitely come asking for that. More importantly, we will be able to customize as per the needs of the customer because in these times, the customers would be looking for greater customization on their vehicles. So with OEMs being able to do that, and especially at our end, when we are introducing the modular platform, we would definitely be able to do that much better. So, in my view, fully built from here on will be the mainstay, and more customers would be coming in by asking for fully built solutions.
Mr. Anuj, as an OEM, your take on the driver shortage issue, if you may want to add something. And another question from one of our attendees: how can OEMs better, support the supplier base? Is there a new selection criteria that the OEM should look at to choose their suppliers so that the entire value chain actually grows along with the OEM? Do you have any thoughts on this?
Okay, Bala, first talking about the driver challenge. Yes, the drivers, there is a challenge. We recognize this much earlier than the others. In fact, I know many of you are aware, but for the others, I would like to inform that we run 11 driver training institutes. The first one which started was way back in 1995 in Namakkal. Namakkal, as we all know, is the hub for all the long haul vehicles. They have huge fleets. The association has those vehicles. So that is where we started our driver training institute. We have it pan India in many of the states. Lots of drivers are being trained. In fact, if I remember correctly, the last count that I had, that we had trained more than 11 lakh drivers. We have now intensified the training efforts, and we are training many more drivers. While what we are also trying to do going forward is to try to uh, kind of create a platform where the customers, our fleet operators, can get in touch with the trained drivers, and like a campus placement for students that happens with the companies. We can work on that, and many of the fleet operators have shown interest coming forward. So we understand that's on one side training, but that's more importantly, how do we make driver as a profession more acceptable in the social context? So there, one thing which Sushil also touched upon briefly is that they stay away from their homes for long periods, maybe for days together. Sometimes they come home once in a month. So that is something which has its own challenges. The relay, as rightly commented by Sushil, is under jury. Like there's no verdict out as of now whether it will be the right model or not. But I think it has to be a judicious mix of various models. But on the other side, which we all need to be very, very kind of the other thing which basically makes the driver profession not such a great one is the safety. Many of the drivers are either losing their lives on in accidents, or even if they are driving the trucks because of the basic, uh, the features, the ergonomics of the vehicle being not that great. The lifespan of the vehicle of the driver is rather limited. So what we are trying to do, at least at our end, is to improve the ergonomics of the vehicle, the safety of the vehicle. In fact, most of the vehicles that we offer, the fully built with the factory built cabins, are complying to European safety norms. So what it means is that the drivers are much feeling much safer. So while the other challenges on the socio-economic front will continue to be there, but at least on the safety, the life, we are also trying to encourage drivers to take insurances so that their families are protected, their livelihoods are protected. There is this model many of the fleet operators have started, and I should congratulate them on that, is what they call as Chalak to Malak. So a driver can become an owner subsequently. So these are the things which I agree with you, Bala. This has to be more integrated. The entire industry has to work around this. The fleet operators also have to understand that the drivers need to be paid their deserving salaries. Their compensation has to be corrected, and definitely there is no other way out. You have to provide them safer working environment. You have to take care of their health, their insurance, their families back home, and also figure out that how they can be associated with their families better. So this is not one, in my view, it will require equal kind of participation from the government side, from the OEMs, from the fleet operators. So the industry as a whole has to back this up. And we need to understand that these drivers play a very, very important role in keeping the wheels of the country moving. So we should not ignore them. We have to, I don't want to say this, but the fact remains that they have not got their just, whatever was what they deserve. So it's high time the industry recognize this and give them their due. On your second point about suppliers and how suppliers should be kind of the engagement between OEMs and suppliers, Bala, is that your question?
Yeah, exactly, sir. How can OEMs help the suppliers and the value chain evolve or upgrade?
What we do is that we believe in long-term partnerships. If you take the legacy of Ashok Leyland with its supplier base, we have suppliers going back even half a century. And we always believe that we have to uh, progress together, we get rewarded together. We are not only fair weather friends, we are there through thick and thin. We have seen many down cycles and up cycles in the industry. Commercial vehicle industry sees a cycle every 4 to 5 years. So many of our suppliers are getting involved with us, whether it is early involvement during the product development. We have come out with a completely new platform for the BS6, wherein our suppliers started engaging with us almost 4 years back. So the suppliers are kind of engaging with us, whether it is on bringing the latest innovation to the markets. Ashok Leyland has always been known for bringing the best, the innovative technology into the market. We were the first ones to introduce the multi-axle vehicle, the first ones to bring the fully air brake systems. So I can go on and on, but just to give the point that collaboration with suppliers at our end has always been strong, but we are also very mindful of this and we are trying to see how it can be done better because we feel that a robust and a good partnership is one which is fruitful and it is a win-win for both of us. We always believe whether it is our suppliers, whether it is our customers, any other stakeholders, we finally go by our brand promise of Aapki Jeet Hamari Jeet. So unless I can make my supplier community profitable, I will not be able to kind of progress in my future business. So these are some things which we always will continue to endeavor, and definitely there is some headroom, and we will continue to work on that.
I'd like to take this opportunity once again to thank our eminent panelists. Firstly, Mr. Anuj Kathuria, thank you so much for taking time out, joining us, and sharing some very, very interesting and optimistic views on what the industry should be doing to overcome the crisis. Uh,
It's always a pleasure to meet up, and thank you all my fellow panelists. It was great being here. Always there is something new to learn, so that's great. And I'm sure that going forward we would be definitely like very shortly coming out of this challenging times. And I take this opportunity to wish all of us the very best.
Thank you, sir.